I had secretly loved Ethan Cole for 3 years. A kind friend once helped me find out what kind of person he was. Back then, Ethan had a cigarette between his lips, his voice calm and detached as he said, "I'm not interested in kids." I got the message and quietly stepped back. From that day on, I tried my best to stay away from him. The next time we met, he was drunk and stopped me right in front of my apartment building in Brooklyn Heights. "Baby, when are you gonna grow up?" "I can't wait any longer," he muttered, his eyes hazy and unfocused. "She can't drink, let me." Ethan stepped in front of me, blocking the glass that someone handed over. He took it, tilted his head back, and finished it in one swallow. The dim light in the bar blurred his face, making it hard to see his expression clearly. Worried, I reached out and tugged lightly at the corner of his shirt. He didn't look back. Instead, he reached behind him, caught my hand, gave it a gentle squeeze, then let go. "Don't worry, just one drink," he said casually. He slouched into a seat beside me, his posture loose and confident, legs spread wide as if the small space belonged entirely to him. I looked down at my phone. 11:28 p.m. In less than half an hour, it would be his birthday. I had already prepared a small cake waiting at the counter. Ethan loved cake, but he was allergic to dairy cream. Over the past 3 years, I had stayed up countless nights, testing recipes, just to make him one he could actually eat. But tonight was different. Inside my purse were 2 crumpled pieces of paper. One was a letter, a confession that held 3 years of unspoken feelings. The other was a handwritten recipe. I hadn't decided which one to give him. Maybe I'd just let fate choose. I stole a glance at him. Our eyes met for a brief second before I looked away in a panic. Ethan gave a soft chuckle and leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. "What are you hiding from, sweetheart?" My face burned. I didn't dare let him see how flustered I was. I placed my hand on his chest and pushed him away lightly. Don't call me that," I whispered. "What then?" he teased. "Should I call you Emma?" Ethan caught my hand, the warmth of his palm spreading through my fingers. With his other hand, he lifted my chin, gently pinching my cheeks between his fingers. His brows lifted, his lazy gaze both amused and knowing. "Why won't you look at me, huh? Feeling nervous about something?" That one sentence made my back break out in a cold sweat. Of course I was nervous, because in just a few minutes, I planned to confess to him. How could I possibly look him in the eye? The room was filled with laughter and chatter. A faint haze of cigarette smoke drifted through the crack in the door, carrying Ethan's familiar scent. I stood outside the private room, holding the cake close to my chest, frozen in place. 7 minutes until midnight. My hand gripped the doorknob tightly, my heart pounded so hard it hurt. Time had never felt this slow. I had rehearsed this moment so many times, how I would walk in, how I would hand him the cake, what I would say. But when I finally pushed the door open, my mind went completely blank. The door opened just a crack, and the voices inside spilled out. Not too loud, but clear enough for me to hear every word. "Ethan, you've been single for so long. Why don't you have a girlfriend yet? Don't tell me you're still waiting for that girl, Lila Thomas," one of them joked. Ethan said nothing. Another voice followed, teasingly. "Oh, come on, that old story again? Let it go already. If you really wanted to date someone, it should be our Sophie. She's sweet, caring, right, Ethan?" "Yeah, Ethan," said Ryan, laughing as he leaned close to him. I gripped the doorknob tighter, my chest twisting with nerves and a faint, desperate hope. Ethan took a slow drag from his cigarette. His voice came out low and calm, like a breeze brushing over a still lake. "I'm not interested in kids." The room erupted with laughter and whistling. Ethan glanced at his watch but didn't say another word. He stubbed out the cigarette in the ashtray, and before the light died, released one last faint puff of smoke. Through that thin haze, I couldn't see his face clearly, only a blur of gray, and it felt as if something deep inside me quietly shattered. At 12:01 a.m., I clutched my phone tightly. Tears rolled down my cheeks, falling onto the screen and spreading into hazy streaks. Through my blurred vision, a hand reached out, holding a napkin in front of me. "Don't cry anymore." I looked up. Standing before me was a young man with silver-dyed hair, wearing a black hoodie. In his hand was a napkin printed with a small cartoon bear. Next to him stood a girl in a white dress, graceful and elegant, holding a birthday cake in her hands. Her eyes were full of concern as she looked at me. Hey, are you okay, sweetheart? She asked softly. I hurriedly waved my hands, my face burning. No, I'm fine, really. Here, wipe your tears. The silver-haired guy beside her reached out his hand again, his voice hoarse as he coughed lightly. I awkwardly took the tissue from him and quickly wiped the tears off my face. That's good, the girl said with a gentle smile. Her smile was so warm it lit up the dim hallway. Then she turned and pushed open the door to the private room beside us. A surprised male voice came from inside. Oh my God, Lila Thomas, you're back. My head jerked up instantly. My fingers clenched the napkin printed with a little bear. It was her, Lila Thomas, the one who entered the room first. The silver-haired guy and I followed right behind her. The whole scene inside the room came into view. Ethan looked up, and the moment his eyes landed on the cake in my hands, the corner of his mouth curved into a faint smile. But the instant his gaze drifted to the person beside me, that smile disappeared, his expression turning cold. His deep voice sounded restrained. Emma, come here. I lowered my head, holding the cake tightly against my chest, and took small steps forward until I reached the only empty seat in the room. The silver-haired guy followed quietly and sat down next to me. The empty seat happened to be on Ethan's left. On his right was Lila Thomas. Her cake sat beautifully displayed right in front of him. I was still holding mine, unsure what to do, standing awkwardly beside my chair, while laughter and chatter filled the room. I felt completely out of place, so unnecessary it was almost suffocating. Ethan stood up, pulled out the chair next to him, and pressed gently on my shoulder to make me sit. Then he reached for the cake I was holding. Out of instinct, I stepped back a little, not wanting to hand it over. The cake Lila had brought was larger, prettier, with delicate decorations, clearly expensive. Ethan froze for a moment before forcing a faint, awkward smile. Emma, didn't you make this one for me? I hesitated, then finally held it out to him. He took it, set it down on the couch beside him, and casually draped his jacket over it. I pressed my lips together, a sting rising in my nose. Ethan, how could you eat 2 birthday cakes? Why did you have to cover mine up? Is it that ugly you can't even put it on the table? When no one was watching, I quietly picked up a napkin and wiped my tears again. Ethan Cole, you jerk. I hate you more than anyone in the world. The atmosphere in the room grew livelier. Everyone had had quite a bit to drink, laughing and chatting more freely than usual. Someone suggested they take turns giving birthday wishes, one by one around the table. When they asked who should start, teasing voices immediately filled the air. Of course Lila should go first. It's been so long since we've seen her. Let her start. I lifted my head and saw her smiling softly as she reached for her wine glass, about to stand up. Ethan calmly pushed a glass of orange juice toward her. No need for wine. Have this instead, he said in his slow, even tone. Laughter and teasing erupted around the table again. I lowered my head, poking at a piece of melon on my plate with my fork. The only thought in my head was, if I don't eat this soon, it'll get soggy. The silver-haired guy beside me, who had been quiet the whole time, leaned slightly toward me and said in a low voice, If you don't eat it now, it's going to melt. I quickly popped it into my mouth and looked up. He was resting his chin on one hand, his silver hair catching the light, his eyes fixed on me. The reflection from the chandelier made him look almost too bright to look at directly. Soon it was his turn. He lifted his glass, looking toward Ethan, his tone easy and confident. Happy birthday, man. After speaking, he downed the drink in one smooth motion, clean, effortless, and effortlessly cool. I followed, lifting my own glass toward Ethan. Happy birthday, I said quietly. Beside him, Lila smiled charmingly, leaning slightly toward him as she said, Ethan, is she your little sister? She's adorable. Ethan frowned, his expression tightening with irritation. He reached out to take the glass from my hand, but before he could, I tilted my head back and drank it all in one go. The liquor burned my throat like fire. Emma Carter, who the hell told you to drink? His voice rose sharply as he shot to his feet, snatching the empty glass from my hand. His whole presence radiated anger and cold tension. One drink and you're out cold. What's with the sudden bravery, huh? Guess you've gotten bold now. His face darkened like a storm cloud, but by then I was already tipsy, his words blending into a blur. I fumbled through my purse, pulling out 2 crumpled sheets of paper. It took me a while to tell them apart, before I bent forward and handed one to him. "Here," I said, slurring a little, "your birthday gift." Ethan took it without looking, crushed it into his palm, and narrowed his eyes dangerously. "Emma Carter? Calling me Ethan now, huh?" I didn't care and kept talking, my voice loose from the alcohol. "It's the cake recipe. I'm giving it to you. From now on, I'm not making cakes anymore. From now on, we're just the best brother and sister in the whole world, okay?" The more I drank, the more talkative I became. I laughed, grabbed his hand, and kept repeating, "Thank you, Ethan. Thank you so much," over and over, completely oblivious to the way his face had turned dark as midnight. The cheerful atmosphere in the room suddenly felt strained. Silence crept in, heavy and awkward. Finally, the silver-haired guy beside me, Noah Reed, gave my sleeve a gentle tug and whispered, "You should sit down." Ethan sat back down too. Everyone around us pretended not to notice what had just happened, forcing laughter and clinking their glasses as if nothing was wrong. I turned to Noah and began chatting nonstop. He didn't say much, but whenever he did, his replies were calm and gentle. Across the table, Lila Thomas rested her chin on her hand, watching us with a soft smile, so soft it made my heart sink a little. I stayed there, occasionally saying a few words to Ethan. "Hey Ethan," I said with a giggle, "what do you think of my brother?" Ethan's eyes locked on me and Noah. His expression was cold, his lips curving into a faint, sarcastic smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lila quickly spoke up with a teasing tone. "Come on, my brother's not that bad. He's tall, handsome, never had a girlfriend. Don't you think he and Emma would make a great match? Maybe you could play matchmaker." She smiled sweetly, her gaze hopeful. "Not a chance," Ethan said flatly, his voice like ice. He suddenly stood up, eyes fixed on me. "Emma Carter, we're going home." Noah and I had been talking happily, and I didn't want to leave at all. Annoyed, I turned away from Ethan. "I'm not going home. I still want to talk to Noah." Lila laughed softly, teasing as she looked at the two of us. "Oh my God, look at them. They're perfect together." Ethan stepped closer, reaching out to pull me into his arms, but I dodged. He bent down, his voice low and strained. "Emma, you're drunk. You need to rest." "Then let Noah take me home," I muttered, brushing his hand away. "She's a little drunk. I'll take her home later," Noah said calmly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he snapped, his tone dangerously sharp. "Say that again, and see what happens." The tension in the room froze solid. Noah didn't back down. His face hardened as he stood, meeting Ethan's glare head-on. Sensing things were about to explode, Lila quickly grabbed Noah's sleeve and said in a soft but urgent voice, "Hey, I'm feeling a little sick. Can you come with me for a minute?" She gave him a pleading look, and he finally let her pull him out of the room. It took me a second to process what had just happened. When they disappeared, I blinked in confusion. "Wait, where's Noah?" Before I could react, Ethan bent down and scooped me up effortlessly, like I weighed nothing. His voice was tinged with jealousy and bitterness. "He's gone. What are you looking for him for? In all these years, I've never seen you rush to find me like that." The familiar warmth of his scent surrounded me. Cigarette smoke mixed with sandalwood and cologne. Instinctively, I shifted, curling up in his arms. I pointed weakly toward the couch, where my cake was still hidden under his jacket. "The cake," I mumbled. Ethan pinched my cheek lightly, his tone somewhere between teasing and disbelief. "You really think I'd forget the gift you gave me?" He took off his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders. The lingering warmth, the scent of smoke and wood, wrapped around me like a memory, soft, familiar, and far too comforting. I sniffled and muttered under my breath, "Arrogant jerk." Ethan didn't catch what I said. He lowered his head, brushing his chin lightly against my hair. What did you say?" I didn't answer. I just buried my face deeper into his shirt. "Ethan, should I drive you two home?" Ryan asked, jingling his car keys as he walked over. "No need," Ethan replied curtly. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and tossed a black card onto the table. "I called a car already. You guys keep drinking. Tonight's on me." Then, almost offhandedly, he added, "Password's 041002. Cheers erupted across the room. "Damn, Ethan, you're the best," someone shouted. My head spun a little, but the number stuck in my mind. 04102. That's my birthday. It wasn't until we were in the car that Ethan finally set me down. He stepped out and went to the nearby pharmacy, returning with anti-hangover medicine. Emma, wake up for a bit, he murmured, shaking my shoulder gently and coaxing me to swallow the pills. He told the driver to switch places, then lowered the divider between the front and back seats. I get carsick easily, and after drinking tonight, my head was pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. Thank God I hadn't eaten anything, or Ethan's luxury car would have been a disaster zone by now. He guided me to lie down, my head resting on his lap. Then, like a magician pulling a trick, he took out an orange from somewhere. His hands, those hands that usually only held pens and signed contracts, slowly and patiently peeled it, separating each piece with care. Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe just everything that had happened tonight, but my eyes began to sting. It was such a small thing, just peeling an orange. But Ethan was someone who hated getting his hands sticky, hated the smell of citrus, and especially hated how the juice stained his nails yellow. Yet every time I got carsick, he would buy oranges because the sourness helped calm my stomach. From then on, he always kept some in his car. And peeling them for me had quietly become his habit. I sniffled, muttering under my breath, "Ethan Cole, you're such a jerk. You say you don't like me, but you're always so damn nice to me." He brought a piece of orange to my lips, and I bit it gently. The sweet sour juice spread across my tongue, so tangy it made my eyes water all over again. Thinking I was uncomfortable, Ethan hurried to wipe my tears with his thumb. His voice softened, deep and tender, almost painfully gentle. "We're home, Emma. Don't cry anymore." Ethan and I were neighbors. Our parents had known each other for years. I'd never thought of us as childhood sweethearts. Our relationship was more like that of an older brother, reluctantly stuck babysitting a clingy kid. He was 4 years older than me, calm, disciplined, responsible even as a boy, and somehow, he ended up taking care of me without anyone asking him to. I remember when our families went on trips together, my dad and his father would always go off somewhere, leaving the two of us behind. During those times, I'd always run over to his house, freeloading meals, clinging to him like a shadow. That went on for years, all the way until I grew up. When I turned 18, my coming-of-age birthday, Ethan was the one who planned everything himself. At exactly midnight, the lights dimmed, and he came out carrying a cake, smiling brightly. "Happy birthday, princess." Outside the window, fireworks bloomed across the night sky. I stood frozen, my heartbeat loud in my ears. The warm, gentle look in Ethan's eyes, the glow of the fireworks reflecting off his face, it was so beautiful it almost hurt to look at. And in that moment, one crazy thought crossed my mind. That night, when I turned 18, I realized I had fallen for Ethan Cole. After that, I began noticing everything about him. His habits, his small gestures, the little things he liked and disliked, and I realized how little I'd actually known him. Like how he was allergic to dairy cream, which was why he never ate sweets. I'd always assumed he just didn't like cake. Or how he loved spicy food, but because I couldn't handle spice, he'd always chosen mild dishes for my sake, so much that I naively thought we shared the same taste. He had always taken care of me, knowing every detail about what I liked, what I hated, how I lived. And me? I hadn't known a thing about him. But I couldn't blame him, because to Ethan, I had always been just a kid. Ethan carried me on his back, each step slow and steady. I rested my head on his shoulder, shame welling up in my chest the more I thought about everything. "I'm sorry, Ethan," I mumbled softly. He tilted his head slightly to glance at me, then turned away, his voice firm. "Emma Carter, don't even think about touching alcohol again. And what the hell were those nonsense things you said earlier?" The moment he finished, I couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears. Even now, he was still worried about me. He was so kind, so impossibly kind, and I was awful. I was trash. How could I ever have such shameless, dirty thoughts about him? Sobbing, I tightened my arms around his neck. "From now on, you're my real brother. I won't ever think stupid things again." Tears and snot smeared across his shoulder as I cried harder. Ethan stayed silent, his face dark as thunder. The second we stepped inside the house, he set me down. His expression was tight, strained, and finally he exploded. Gripping both my cheeks between his hands, he growled through gritted teeth. "Emma Carter, have you lost your damn mind? Who the hell said I wanted to be your brother?" He pushed me back until my shoulders hit the cold wooden door. His words were sharp, his eyes blazing. But instead of backing away, I leaned forward again, pressing my forehead against his chest. Right now, Ethan felt like a living heater, solid, warm, safe. I couldn't help curling into him. Ethan clenched his jaw, clearly exasperated. Finally, he sighed, scooped me up, and dropped me onto the couch with a frustrated thump. He grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. Emma, look at me. Really look. Who am I? But after a whole night of drinking and crying, I was completely exhausted. The moment my back hit the couch, drowsiness washed over me. Ethan kept scolding, his voice a steady rumble, like a stubborn puppy that refused to stop barking until it got an answer. My foggy brain couldn't process anything anymore, just pure instinct. I reached up, pulled him down, and wrapped my arms around him, making him lose his balance and fall right on top of me. Ethan, I murmured, voice thick with sleep, I'm tired. Let me sleep, okay? I rubbed my face against his cheek, my voice soft and slurred. In the dim light, the tips of Ethan's ears turned red. He sighed quietly, one arm sliding around my waist, his tone low and helpless. You heartless little thing, after all these years taking care of you, I've somehow turned into your brother, huh? When I opened my eyes the next morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. I fumbled for it, pressed answer, and immediately heard Tina's voice squealing on the other end. Emma, tell me, did you finally get Ethan Cole last night? I groaned, holding my aching head. He said, he's not interested in kids, I muttered weakly. What? So did you confess or not? Tina demanded. No, I didn't even make it to the battlefield before collapsing. I basically turned myself into a clown. I buried my face in the blanket, feeling like I was melting into a puddle of humiliation. Tina tried to comfort me. Oh, come on, Emma. There are plenty of good guys out there. Why hang yourself on one tree? No Ethan? Then go find another one. There are a million Ethans in the world. She didn't even give me a chance to protest before adding, dress up tonight. I'm taking you out. We're going to have fun, and you're not allowed to bail. 8 p.m., be there or else. Then she hung up. I sat up on the bed and screamed into my pillow. Ah! Why? Why doesn't Ethan like me? I rolled around like a lunatic, kicking and thrashing, completely unaware that Ethan had been standing at the doorway for who knows how long. It wasn't until he cleared his throat and knocked gently on the door that I froze. Breakfast, he said simply. I went rigid. I didn't even have to look to know he was definitely smiling, that annoying, teasing smile of his. He was absolutely laughing at me. Trying to act casual, I jumped up, pretending to look for something. Huh? Where's my phone? I swear I just had it. Never mind, I'll look later. I got off the bed, forcing a serious expression as I avoided his gaze. I was just looking for something. Rolling around makes it faster. Don't get the wrong idea. Ethan pressed his lips together, the corners twitching as he struggled not to laugh. His neck flushed red from holding it in. Yeah, sure, he said, voice strained with amusement. Hurry up and come eat. God, I wanted to dig a hole and bury myself in it. What the hell was I even doing? At the dining table, every dish laid out was something I loved. In that instant, all the embarrassment from earlier vanished. Whatever. Forget it. Food, glorious food, I mumbled to myself, grabbing my chopsticks. Today I'll be the happiest little pig alive. Just as I picked up my chopsticks to take a bite, Ethan stopped me. He gently took them from my hand and walked into the kitchen. When he came back, he was holding a steaming bowl of plain porridge. He set it down in front of me, so thoughtful he'd even brought a spoon. You drank last night, he said in that calm, matter-of-fact tone. No greasy food this morning. Have some porridge, it'll be easier on your stomach. I tugged at the corner of my lips. So I should thank you, huh? He smiled faintly. No need to be polite, sweetheart. Eat up. The memory of last night flashed before my eyes, me drunk out of my mind, clinging to him and calling, Ethan, Ethan. I stole a glance at him. He was sitting across from me, smiling gently, picking up a bit of food for himself, as if nothing had happened. It's good, he said. Why aren't you eating? Come on, sweetheart. I swallowed a spoonful of porridge, my throat tight, eyes stinging. Ethan Cole, you jerk. I hate you so much. Thank you, Ethan, I muttered under my breath. He gave a casual nod. You're welcome, sweetheart. I finished quickly, then stomped off to my room in a huff. Grabbing the giant white teddy bear he'd given me last year for my birthday, I squeezed it until the fur clumped up in my fists. Stupid stingy man. All I did was call you Ethan a few times. Why are you making such a big deal? You say you're not interested in kids, but don't want to be my brother either. So what do you want then? My dad? I froze, eyes widening at my own ridiculous thought. But the more I thought about it, the more it made a weird kind of sense. Ethan had always been so strict and careful with me, taking care of every little thing. In a way, he really was like half a father figure. Then again, I was adorable, smart, and one of a kind. How many people could actually be qualified to be my dad? If Ethan wanted to compete for custody, it wouldn't be all that surprising. Panicking, I grabbed my phone and called my dad. My hands trembled as I spoke. Dad, listen to me. You're my only dad, okay? Please don't ever give custody of me to Ethan. Get lost. That was all he said before hanging up. A second later, Ethan's voice came from outside my door. Sweetheart, want some strawberries? Dragging my slippers across the floor, I shuffled to the door and opened it. He was standing there holding a small box of strawberries. I looked up at him with a serious face. Ethan, I said solemnly, you can stop trying so hard. He blinked, momentarily confused, his expression uncertain. What are you talking about? He asked, frowning slightly. I'll never recognize you as my father, I declared. For a moment, Ethan just stared at me, stunned. Then he sighed, reached out, and pinched both my cheeks, stretching them apart. Emma Carter, are you still drunk? What nonsense are you spouting this time? I'm not drunk, I mumbled, my words garbled as I tried to pull his hands away. He looked at me for a long moment, his gaze flickering with something unreadable, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. In the end, he just let go and softly brushed my cheek with his thumb. I'll be out for a bit. Stay home and behave, okay? I nodded absently, picking through the strawberries in the box. I popped one into my mouth, savoring the sweetness as I remembered my promise to Tina. Oh, actually, I'm going out later, I said quickly. You don't need to cook dinner tonight. Ethan frowned, about to speak, but I was faster. I pushed him toward the door with both hands. Bye! Have fun! That evening, the bar was dimly lit, pulsing with heavy bass that made my eardrums ache. I squeezed through the crowd and finally spotted Tina lounging on a sofa. Tina, I shouted over the music. You're seriously living it up, huh? Aren't you afraid Jason will fly back from overseas and kill you? Tina was sprawled across the couch, one arm around a guy and another resting on someone else's shoulder. A few more handsome men sat nearby, the whole scene like a honey trap. She rolled her eyes. Don't even mention him. We broke up. He's living the good life abroad, so why should I play the sweet innocent one here? Then she gestured at the two guys beside her. These two, take care of her for me, okay? Both guys smiled, confident and charming. They weren't as striking as Ethan, but each had his own appeal. At first, I waved my hands frantically. No, I'm fine. But 10 minutes later, the guy on my left was feeding me grapes, and the one on my right was giving me a shoulder massage. It wasn't that I didn't want to resist, it's just... The service was really, really good. Meanwhile, Tina was laughing so hard at the attention she was getting, her smile brighter than the neon lights around us. Tina waved her hand and ordered a few more bottles of top-shelf liquor. The guy massaging my shoulders leaned closer, his tone half teasing, half mocking. Your friend over there is really generous. Those bottles cost a fortune, and she just snapped her fingers to buy them. Bet those guys over there are over the moon right now. I narrowed my eyes, enjoying the massage a little too much, but when I heard that, I scratched my nose awkwardly. Getting a free massage like this? Yeah, maybe it was a bit weird. I cleared my throat lightly and pointed at the bottles. How much are those anyway? And how much commission do you guys make for selling them? The guy didn't answer directly. He just held up 2 fingers and smiled. 20% per bottle. My eyes widened. 20%? Those bottles must cost a fortune, probably mixed with liquid gold or something. I discreetly opened my banking app, counted the zeros, and grimaced. Yeah, not even close. When I looked up, the guy was smiling, lips pressed together as if trying not to laugh. I didn't want to admit I couldn't afford it, so I thought maybe I could get a little help. Just a little. So I did the unthinkable. I texted Ethan. Are you there? He replied almost instantly. Yeah. Why? I ran out of money. Can you send me a little? Maybe some gold too? His response came almost immediately. What? Planning to tip your male models? Uh-oh, I froze, eyes darting around the room. And sure enough, when I looked up, there he was. Ethan stood on the upper level, leaning casually against the railing, a cigarette between his fingers, smoke curling lazily in the air. His eyes narrowed as he looked down at me, amused and just a little mocking. Next to him was a group of people I recognized. On his left was Ryan, grinning smugly, like he was enjoying every second of my humiliation. I shot him a death glare. On Ethan's right stood Lila Thomas, and beside her, a stunning girl with short hair. They were standing so close there was barely space between them. My heart sank at the sight. Whatever, I told myself bitterly, he's with a woman too. It's not like I'm the only one making a fool of myself. But before I could comfort myself further, I saw Lila tilt her head and kiss the short-haired girl, right on the lips. My jaw dropped. Wait. What? Instinctively, my gaze flew to Ethan. He didn't say a word, just lifted his hand slightly, curling a finger to beckon me up. Running wasn't an option. I sighed, waved goodbye to Tina, and dragged myself toward the stairs. It was only a 3-minute walk, but somehow it took me 5, my legs shaking the whole way. Ethan stubbed out his cigarette when I reached the top. His eyes flicked down at my trembling knees. What's wrong? Weren't you all brave and bold a minute ago? I gave an awkward laugh. Heh, well, I didn't know you were here. Anyway, if there's nothing, I'll just go back down. Tina's still waiting for me. Ethan let out a quiet chuckle, low and cold. You might want to worry about yourself instead. Jason just landed, Tina's boyfriend. He's already on his way here. As soon as he said it, I saw Jason in a black jacket stride into the bar, his face dark with fury. He marched straight toward the sofa and dragged Tina out of the crowd by the wrist. Oh no. I turned away and whispered a desperate prayer. Amen. God, please help Tina survive this one. Then I looked back at Ethan. You're not even gonna let me explain, huh? I'm an adult, Ethan. I'm old enough to date if I want. You should understand that. My tone was firm, but my heart was pounding wildly. Ethan looked at me, then suddenly laughed, sharp and disbelieving. You? An adult? Bookmark. Ryan, ever the instigator, chimed in immediately, fanning the flames. Come on, Ethan, give her a break. Emma's a grown woman now, she can make her own choices. I saw Ethan's expression darken, his jaw tightening. I wanted to strangle Ryan right then and there. Thankfully, Lila noticed the tension rising. She walked over, smiling, and slipped an arm around my shoulder, pulling me gently to her side. Come here, Emma, stand next to me. She positioned me just right beside Ethan. I hesitated for a moment, then took 2 small steps forward. Lila gestured to the girl with short hair next to her. Emma, this is my girlfriend, Nina. You can call her Sister Nina. I blinked in surprise, then quickly smiled. Hi, Sister Nina. The short-haired girl blushed lightly and smiled back. My heart nearly burst. Oh my God, she's adorable. Remembering what I'd seen earlier, I hesitated, then tried to ask casually, So, Sister Nina, you and Ethan? Lila immediately waved her hand, frowning. Don't even mention it. Back then, Leela said lazily, twirling her glass of wine, I only helped him fend off a few annoying women. Somehow, someone spread a rumor that he was my first love. Then, as if remembering something, her lips curved into a teasing smile. But you know what? Ethan actually does have a real first love. I heard he's liked her since they were kids. My hand tightened around the hem of my shirt, my heartbeat pounding wildly. I'd told myself I didn't like him anymore, but after 3 years of feelings, how could I just stop like that? Lila leaned sideways against Nina, whispering near her ear. Those two are interesting, aren't they? For the sake of old times, I'll give him a little push. Nina laughed softly, swatting her arm. Stop scheming. But Lila only smirked and waved her hand dismissively. Then she turned to me, eyes bright with mischief. Hey Emma, what do you think of my little brother? He's been begging me for your WeChat all night. Huh, oh, well, I stammered, completely caught off guard. Before I could finish, a husky voice called from behind me. Lila! I froze. Ethan suddenly wrapped his arms around me from behind, clinging like a drunken koala. The sharp smell of alcohol hit my nose, instantly taking over all my senses. I turned around. Empty bottles littered the table. I had no idea how much he'd drunk. Frowning, I reached out to steady him, completely unaware that his eyes had flicked briefly toward Lila. Behind him, Lila rolled her eyes helplessly at Ethan, before turning to Nina with a sigh. Men, so dramatic. Then she smiled at me. We'll leave you two to it. Bye. Bye, Emma. I half carried, half dragged Ethan out. He was so unsteady he could barely walk straight, his weight pressing into me as we made our way out of the bar. It took all my strength to get him into a cab. By the time we got in, he was a little calmer. His breath was warm against my neck, tickling and sending waves of heat through my body. I slipped my arms around his waist for balance, lowering my head to study his face. He looked so calm, his eyelashes trembling slightly as he breathed. Probably the only time I'd ever have the courage to look at him this closely. Lila's words echoed in my head. He's liked her since they were kids. I frowned. That can't be right. We'd grown up together. If he'd liked someone since childhood, how could I not know? Who else had been around him all that time besides me? My thoughts tangled together in knots. I stared out the window, where our reflections overlapped faintly in the glass, his and mine side by side. For a moment, it felt like something clicked. Could Ethan like me? No way. He'd said it himself, he wasn't interested in kids. Frustration bubbled up inside me. I grabbed a handful of his hair and gave it a sharp tug. You idiot, I'm not a kid anymore. He groaned softly, and I quickly let go, guilt mixing with irritation. Stupid Ethan, I muttered. Would it kill you to like me just a little? The taxi came to a stop. We're here, the driver called out. The sound snapped me out of my thoughts. I didn't notice the way Ethan's body had suddenly gone still when he heard what I said. When we got to the door, I struggled to balance him while digging through my bag for the keys. By the time I finally got the door open, sweat was running down my back. I shoved him lightly, muttering under my breath, You're unbelievable. Getting drunk and making me take care of you. Why don't you call your first love to do it instead? Before I could take another step, Ethan's arm slipped around my waist, pulling me back against the shoe cabinet. His eyes were sharp and bright, nothing like a drunk's. The air between us shifted, charged with something that made my breath hitch. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling a little. What about that girl you've liked for years? Ethan's gaze darkened. He lowered his head, hiding his expression, and finally rested his forehead lightly against my chest. His voice came out low, rough, and helplessly tender. Sweetheart, when are you gonna grow up? I'm running out of patience. My heart thudded painfully. I turned my face away, my ears burning. Ethan, I have grown up. Stop treating me like a child. He lifted his head slowly, his eyes locked on mine. He studied my face for a long moment, then his lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. His voice dropped, low and husky. Then this all-grown-up version of you? Can I kiss her now? What? The question exploded in my head, short-circuiting my brain. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Ethan leaned down, his breath brushing against my lips. I didn't move. Couldn't. He chuckled softly, and then his mouth met mine. The faint sweetness of alcohol mixed with warmth spread through me, dizzy and intoxicating. I didn't know what he'd been drinking, but whatever it was, it tasted so unbelievably sweet. I instinctively licked my lips, and immediately, Ethan tightened his grip, deepening the kiss until I could barely breathe. It felt endless, his warmth pressing closer, his breath mingling with mine, until my cheeks burned red and he finally let go. I stared at him blankly, my legs weak and trembling. He caught me easily, pulling me down onto the sofa, kissing me a few more times between shallow breaths. You're drunk and still so stubborn, he murmured. I pushed him away, my voice shaking. Ethan, are you sure you're not too drunk right now? He leaned in close, his breath brushing against my ear, voice low and rough. That depends. Do you want me drunk or sober? His voice was already deep, but with that hoarse edge, it slid straight down my spine. My throat felt dry. I hesitated for a long moment before whispering, I'll wait. I'm not gambling everything on one blurred night. Ethan, come to me when you're sober. Before he could speak, I wriggled free from his arms and ran toward my room. When I reached the door, I glanced back. He was still sitting there, leaning lazily against the sofa, head tilted slightly, looking maddeningly relaxed. The sight made my heart itch. I bit my lip, fighting with myself, and then turned around, rushing back toward him. Whatever. We've already kissed this much. One more time won't kill anyone. Ethan looked up, clearly confused, his brows furrowing. I took a deep breath, climbed onto the sofa, braced my hands on his shoulders, and leaned down to kiss him, slowly, softly, and sincerely. He lifted his head, one arm sliding around my waist. This time, his kiss wasn't hungry or demanding. It was gentle, trembling, filled with quiet emotion. When I tried to pull away, his hand tightened at my waist. His voice was a mix of a chuckle and a low warning. "Sweetheart, I gave you a chance to leave. You're the one who came running back." The next thing I knew, I woke up sprawled on the bed like a dead fish. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. Thinking about last night made me bury my face in my hands and groan. The whole thing had been like a spark meeting gunpowder. I'd braced myself for something to happen, but instead, Ethan had just tucked me into bed, pulled the blanket over me, and then lay down beside me. With the blanket separating us, he wrapped an arm around me and fell asleep, just like that. Leaving me wide awake, staring at the ceiling all night, wondering one thing over and over: is Ethan, maybe, not able to? The next morning, I washed my face and stepped out of my room. Ethan was sitting on the couch, head bent, completely focused on something. He wasn't cooking like usual, which was rare. Curiosity got the better of me, so I crept up behind him and peeked over his shoulder. The paper in his hand looked oddly familiar. Then it hit me like a slap. Oh my God. That's my love letter. The one I'd written to him months ago and hidden away. How the hell did he find that? I lunged forward, covering his eyes with one hand while trying to snatch the letter with the other. But Ethan was stronger. He caught me easily, pulling me into his lap as he held the paper just out of reach. "So," he said, smirking, eyes glinting with amusement, "my sweetheart's been in love with me this long, huh?" My face went up in flames. I don't know what you're talking about." I tried to wriggle away, but his grip was too firm. My legs kicked helplessly, to no effect. Whether he was teasing me or genuinely curious, I couldn't tell, but he made me sit there and read the damn letter with him. He didn't seem to realize how mortifying that was. That letter was basically my diary. It wasn't meant for anyone else's eyes, least of all his. He read it slowly, grinning the whole time, occasionally making comments that made me want to evaporate on the spot. "You misspelled this word," he murmured. "And this sentence? Total grammar fail." I could only nod frantically, not daring to meet his eyes, my face so hot it could have cooked an egg. Nothing in the world was more humiliating than having the man you like proofread your love letter. When he finally finished, he folded it neatly and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "If you liked me for that long," he said, tone playful, "why didn't you say something?" I glared at him. "Because you said you weren't interested in kids." The memory of that moment made my anger flare again. I stomped over to the opposite sofa, grabbed a straw from the table, and mimicked him perfectly, leaning back, looking lazy and cold. "I'm not interested in kids," I said in the same detached tone he'd used that night. Ethan chuckled, eyes crinkling with amusement as he leaned closer. "I was drunk and talking nonsense back then. Can't you forgive me just this once?" I let out a small huff and turned my face away, pretending not to care, but my lips wouldn't stop twitching. I pushed him away gently, looked straight into his eyes, and asked the question I hadn't gotten an answer to last night. "Ethan, are you sober now?" He seemed to sense how serious I was. The usual laziness faded from his expression, replaced by something quiet and steady. He nodded once. I bit my lip. "I've come this far. What's left to be afraid of? At worst, my heart will just break one more time." "Then tell me," I said softly. "What are we now? What's our relationship?" My fingers clenched together as I searched his face for any sign of hesitation. I was terrified that he'd dodge the question, that he'd hesitate even for a second. Because if he did, I'd walk away right then. I couldn't bear another empty promise, but Ethan didn't answer. He simply took my hand and led me toward the bedroom. When we reached the door, he turned back, brushed his thumb across my cheek, and said quietly, "Wait here for me, sweetheart." Then he went inside. A few minutes later, Ethan returned carrying a large box, worn at the edges but carefully kept. He sat me down beside him and slowly opened it, as though he were opening up years of his own life. Inside was a collection of small, faded things. A paper flower I made when I was 4 and he'd once praised. A photo of us together at 5. A tiny plastic ring I'd given him during our pretend wedding at 6. A twig I'd picked up for him when I was 7. And a crumpled certificate from when I placed first in class. That box held nearly my entire childhood. Our childhood. At the very bottom was a thick notebook. Ethan handed it to me, his voice soft. I've been writing in it for 16 years. I opened it. His handwriting filled every page from when I was 4 all the way to now, when I was 20. On the newest page, written that very morning, were the words, "Sweetheart kissed me today." Does that mean she likes me too? I hope she won't run when she wakes up. Maybe I should buy a ring later. What kind does she like? My hands are shaking. I can't believe this is real. Finally, she's almost mine. Each word was clumsy, unpolished, but full of raw emotion. And at the end, in shaky but clear writing, was one last line. Thank God, my sweetheart is finally going to be mine. My tears fell onto the page before I realized it. Ethan wiped them away, his voice gentle as a breeze. Why are you crying, sweetheart? I closed the notebook carefully, set it back into the box, and threw myself into his arms, sobbing. Ethan, I promise I'll treat you well. I had no idea you'd liked me for so long. He chuckled softly, running a hand through my hair. So will you give me the chance to stay with you, for good? I looked up, tears still clinging to my lashes, and nodded hard. Yes. He smiled then, as if by magic, pulled out another small box. Inside was a delicate silver ring. He slipped it onto my finger, exhaled deeply, and pressed a light kiss to my cheek. His voice was husky and tender. Finally, you're mine. Everything that had been tangled between us suddenly felt right, like it was always meant to lead here. When I woke the next morning, I was still in Ethan's arms. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, tracing soft lines across his face. His lashes caught the light, looking almost golden. I couldn't stop staring at him. The man who once said he wasn't interested in kids was now holding me like he'd never let go. Life really had a wicked sense of humor. He stirred slightly, his voice still hoarse from sleep. Had enough staring, sweetheart? I startled and tried to turn away, but he caught me easily, resting his chin on my forehead. If I hadn't woken up, you might have stared a hole straight through me. I flushed bright red. You think everyone likes looking at you that much? He chuckled, his tone lazy but warm. As long as you do, that's all that matters. I was about to retort, but his hand slid into my hair, trailing down the side of my neck. His warm breath brushed against my skin, sending tiny sparks racing down my spine. I shivered and tried to push him back. Don't you have a meeting this morning? Postponed? He murmured shortly, kissing the base of my throat. What's wrong? My grown-up sweetheart still afraid? I bit my lip, speechless, my heart thundering. If this is punishment for loving him in secret for 3 years, I thought, then I'll gladly take it for the rest of my life. After a while, Ethan finally sat up, straightening his shirt with that same unhurried grace that made my chest tighten all over again. He glanced at me, still wrapped in a blanket like a cocoon. 5 more minutes, and I really have to go, he said, buttoning his shirt. So, are you sending me off, or do you want me to send you off instead? I threw a pillow at him. Go, and if you die, don't expect me to save you. He caught the pillow easily, chuckling, then leaned down to steal a quick kiss. Make sure you eat breakfast, and stop overthinking things. I squinted suspiciously. What do you think I'm overthinking about? He straightened his tie, turning slightly with that infuriating half-smile. Probably the same thing I'm thinking right now. By the time he came home that afternoon, I was sprawled across the couch, face buried in my phone, grinning like an idiot. Ethan tilted his head, raising a brow. What's so funny, sweetheart? Without looking up, I answered, a video. It's about a boyfriend who's so gentle it feels unreal. Ethan gave a soft laugh, one corner of his mouth lifting. And what about me? Do you think I'm real enough? I pretended to think deeply, tapping my chin. You're definitely real, but the gentle part? Kinda lacking. Before I could blink, he was leaning over me, caging me between his chest and the sofa. His voice dropped, low and teasing. Lacking, huh? Guess I should make up for that. I didn't even have time to react before his lips crashed into mine, stealing my breath until all I could hear was my heart pounding wildly. My mind melted into a blur. When he finally pulled away, I was gasping, glaring up at him. Where did you even learn this twisted version of gentleness, huh? Ethan's lips curved in that familiar half-smile, his eyes warm with amusement. From you, sweetheart? And just like that, the last of my anger dissolved. After 3 long years of waiting, my love for Ethan was no longer one-sided. He was still the man who made my heart race every time he smiled. Only now, I had the right to smile back, to kiss him, to call him mine. Extra scene 2, Ethan's point of view. I used to think no woman could ever make me lose control. But the day Emma Carter came into my life, every definition of composure became a joke. 3 years of waiting. 3 years watching the noisy, bright girl who lived across the street, sometimes cheerful enough to make me laugh, sometimes reckless enough to drive me insane. On her 18th birthday, I planned everything. The cake, the fireworks, even the words I'd practiced saying 100 times, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I thought that if I gave it a little more time, she'd understand that what I wanted wasn't to be her brother figure. But she was both innocent and stubborn, always seeing me as some guardian assigned by fate. Every time I looked at her for a little too long, she'd tease, "Why are you looking at me like my dad would?" I'd laugh it off. But inside, I'd wonder, if I were her father, would it still be wrong to want to kiss her? The night I said I wasn't interested in kids was the stupidest moment of my life. I just wanted to shut up my friends' teasing. I didn't realize she was standing outside the door, hearing everything. The look in her eyes when I turned, like a light going out. No anger, no blame, just quiet heartbreak. My hand trembled around my cigarette. If someone hadn't been beside me, I would have chased after her right then. On that same birthday, she came to me trembling, holding a cake with both hands like a fragile secret. I wanted to get up and take it, but I didn't dare. I was terrified that if I so much as touched her, I'd lose all control. So I hid the cake she made beneath my jacket, not because I thought it was ugly, but because I didn't want anyone to see her red, tear-swollen eyes. That foolish girl never knew. Just one of her tears was enough to make me want to give her the world if it meant she'd smile again. The night she got drunk and confessed, calling me her brother, I almost laughed and almost cried. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, voice trembling, "You're such a good person, Ethan. From now on, you'll be my real brother, okay?" In that moment, it felt like someone crushed my heart in their fist. Brother? No. I'd rather be a sinner in her eyes than spend my life pretending we were nothing more than family. She'll never know this, but I've kept everything she's ever given me. The crooked moon drawing she made at 4. The tiny note she asked me to turn in to her elementary teacher. Every memory, every scrap of her handwriting. Proof of a love I wasn't allowed to show. A love that grew quietly, year after year, neither permitted nor forbidden, until it became the very air I breathed. I thought I could keep it hidden forever. But the night she handed me that folded recipe for her cake, smiling shyly and saying, "We'll be the best siblings in the world," I knew. My secret was already starting to unravel. That was the moment I realized I no longer had the strength to hold back. When she kissed me for the first time, that clumsy, trembling confession hidden behind her lips, I knew every second of waiting had been worth it. Her heartbeat raced against mine, wild and unsteady, just like my own. Her breath was soft and sweet, her movements hesitant, unsure. I kissed her back, gently but firmly enough to make my claim clear. "You came back to me," I murmured against her lips. "That means you chose me, sweetheart." From that moment on, I stopped hiding behind the role of her brother. I wanted the world to know the girl I had loved in silence for years was mine now. 1 year later, every morning, I still wake up with her in my arms. Emma Carter, the same girl who once made me lose my mind, now fits perfectly against me, breathing softly into my chest. She's still loud, stubborn, and sometimes drives me insane, but she's also the warmth that fills every corner of my home. Sometimes she asks, half pouting, half serious, "If I get old someday, will you still love me?" I always laugh and pinch her cheek. "If you're old, I'll be blind. I won't see anyone but you anyway." She blushes, grumbling something under her breath, but then rests her head against my chest, listening to the steady rhythm of my heartbeat, the one that's been hers all along. They say loving someone in silence for 3 years is foolish. But if that kind of foolishness means getting to spend a lifetime by her side, then I'd gladly be a fool again.